The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Judge Harold Benton sat high behind his wooden desk, looking down at everyone with tired eyes. Outside the tall windows, snow fell slowly, making the winter day look gray and cold. Inside, the air felt heavy like a storm was coming. Melissa Hale sat at the defense table with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a dark blue dress, and her hair was pulled back perfectly. She looked calm, too calm, like a statue of a person instead of a real person. Everyone was waiting. The reporters in the back row leaned forward with their notebooks. The people in the visitor seats whispered to each other. The lawyers shuffled their papers. And Melissa just sat there, not moving, barely blinking. Then it happened. "Melissa, don't do this to me." The voice cut through the quiet like a knife through butter. Everyone jumped. Heads turned. Eyes went wide. But the voice didn't come from a person. It came from a cage sitting on a small table near the judge. Inside the cage was a bright green parrot with clever black eyes and a curved yellow beak. The bird tilted its head and made a soft clicking sound with its tongue. "Order!" Judge Benton banged his wooden hammer on the desk. "Who brought that bird into my courtroom?" "Your Honor," said the prosecutor, a tall woman named Andrea Clean with sharp glasses and sharper eyes. "The parrot is evidence. His name is Echo. He belonged to the victim, Richard Hale." Melissa's calm face finally moved, just a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. But it was enough. Everyone saw it. Judge Benton frowned. "A parrot? As evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor." Andrea stood up straight and tall. "This parrot lived in the house the night of the fire. He heard everything. And parrots remember what they hear. They repeat it, sometimes for years." A wave of whispers spread to the courtroom like wine through tall grass. The judge held up his hand for quiet. "Continue." Andrea nodded. She walked slowly toward the jury, her shoes clicking on the hard floor. "Let me tell you what happened on the night of January 15th. It was cold that night, very cold. Richard Hale was alone in his house with his wife, Melissa. Richard couldn't walk, couldn't move his legs at all. He'd been in a wheelchair for 3 years after a terrible car accident. Melissa stared straight ahead, her face like stone again. Richard trusted his wife. Andrea continued. He had to. She fed him, helped him get dressed, pushed his wheelchair. He depended on her for everything. She paused and looked right at Melissa. "And someone tried to burn him alive." Gasps filled the room. At 11:47 that night, firefighters got a call. A house was on fire on Maple Street. When they arrived, flames were shooting out of the windows. They broke down the door and found Richard Hale in his wheelchair in the living room, surrounded by smoke and fire. He was unconscious, nearly dead. Andrea walked back to her table and picked up a folder. The firefighters saved him. Barely. And do you know what else they found in that burning house? She looked at the parrot. Echo, this parrot, in his cage near the window, screaming the same words over and over. "Melissa, don't do this to me. Melissa, don't do this to me." The courtroom exploded with noise. People shouted. Reporters scribbled frantically. The judge banged his hammer 3 times. "Quiet. I will have order." When everyone settled down, Andrea continued. Melissa Hale claimed she wasn't home that night. She says she went to visit her sister across town. But we have witnesses who saw her car parked 2 blocks away at 11:30. We have evidence that gasoline was poured in 3 different rooms of the house. And we have this parrot, who heard Richard Hale begging his wife not to kill him. Melissa's lawyer, a round man with a red face named Mr. Thompson, jumped to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, a parrot cannot be a witness. This is ridiculous." "Overruled," Judge Benton said slowly. He stared at Echo with curious eyes. "I want to hear more about this bird." Andrea smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor. Echo isn't just any parrot. African gray parrots like him are incredibly smart. They can learn hundreds of words. They understand tone and emotion. They remember voices perfectly." She walked closer to the cage. Echo lived with Richard for 8 years. He knew Richard's voice better than anyone. "Please, I can't move," Echo suddenly squawked. The room went completely silent. Those words hung in the air like ghosts. Cold, terrible, real. A woman in the back row started crying softly. Melissa's hands, folded so perfectly in her lap, began to shake. Just a little. But Judge Benton saw it. The jury saw it. Everyone saw it. "That's Richard's voice," Andrea said quietly. Or rather, that's Echo repeating what Richard said. What Richard screamed while someone poured gasoline around his wheelchair, while someone lit a match. Mr. Thompson stood up again, his face even redder. "Your Honor, this is pure theater. There's no proof that Bird heard those words that night. He could have heard them any time. Richard was paralyzed. He probably said, 'I can't move,' 1,000 times. Perhaps," Andrea said, "but he probably didn't say, 'Melissa, don't do this to me,' 1,000 times. That's specific. That's a man begging for his life." She turned to look at Melissa directly, and firefighters heard Echo screaming it while the house burned, while Richard lay dying in the smoke. Melissa finally looked up. Her eyes met Andrea's eyes. For just a moment, something cold and angry flashed across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that calm, perfect mask. But it was too late. Everyone had seen the real Melissa underneath. Judge Benton leaned back in his chair. "Where's Richard Hale now?" "In the hospital, Your Honor," Andrea said softly. "He survived the fire, but the smoke damaged his lungs. He's alive, but he can't speak anymore. The doctors say he may never speak again. So the Parrot speaks for him." The judge said, "Yes, Your Honor, the Parrot speaks for him." Echo ruffled his bright green feathers and made a soft, cooing sound. His black eyes looked around the courtroom, taking everything in, remembering everything, just like he always did. "Good boy, Echo," the bird said in a gentle voice. Richard's voice. A voice full of love for his pet. A voice that would now help catch his killer. Judge Benton banged his hammer once. "We'll hear the rest of the evidence, but I'm allowing the Parrot to stay. This court will consider everything, even what a bird remembers." As people started talking again, Melissa closed her eyes. Her perfect mask was cracking. And somewhere deep inside that quiet courtroom, the truth was starting to break free. All because a Parrot never forgot what he heard. All because Echo remembered the night someone tried to murder his best friend. The prosecutor, Andrea Clean, walked to the center of the courtroom. In her hands, she held a thick folder stuffed with papers and photographs. Her face was serious. "Let me tell you about Richard and Melissa Hale," she began. "They got married 7 years ago. Everyone said they were perfect together. Melissa was beautiful and smart. Richard had a good job at a computer company. They bought a nice house on Maple Street. They seemed happy." She opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger Richard standing tall beside Melissa. Both were smiling at a wedding. Melissa wore white and held flowers. Richard looked strong and healthy. "But 3 years ago, everything changed," Andrea continued. "Richard was driving home from work one rainy night. Another car hit him hard. The accident broke his back. The doctors said he would never walk again, never move his legs. He would need a wheelchair for the rest of his life." The jury leaned forward, listening carefully. Richard came home from the hospital a different man. Not just his body. His whole life changed. He couldn't work anymore. He couldn't do simple things like get dressed or make breakfast. He needed help with everything. Andrea paused, and Melissa became the person he depended on completely. Andrea pulled out another photograph. This one showed Richard in his wheelchair, looking thin and tired. His eyes didn't smile anymore. At first, Melissa seemed like a devoted wife. She took care of Richard. She quit her job to stay home with him. Neighbors saw her pushing his wheelchair around the neighborhood. But something was wrong. Something nobody saw. Objection. Mr. Thompson stood up fast. "The prosecutor is making up stories. Where's the proof?" "I'm getting to that," Andrea said calmly. She pulled out more papers. "We found Richard's journal. He kept it hidden in his desk drawer. He wrote in it every night when Melissa thought he was asleep." She began to read. "May 3rd. Melissa yelled at me today because I spilled my water. She said I was useless. She said taking care of me was ruining her life. I told her I was sorry. I'm always sorry now. The courtroom was silent, except for Andrea's voice. June 15th. Melissa left me alone for 6 hours today. I was hungry and thirsty, but I couldn't reach the kitchen. I called for her, but she didn't come home until dark. When she came back, she smelled like perfume and someone else's cologne. She wouldn't look at me. A woman on the jury wiped her eyes. September 22nd. I heard Melissa on the phone last night. She was talking to someone named Dylan. She laughed with him the way she used to laugh with me. I think she wants me gone. I think she wishes the accident had killed me. Andrea closed the journal slowly. Richard was afraid of his own wife, the woman who was supposed to love him, the woman who was supposed to take care of him. Melissa sat perfectly still, but her face had gone very pale. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. Andrea walked toward Echo's cage. The parrot watched her with bright, intelligent eyes. Richard had one friend he could trust. Echo. He'd rescued this parrot from a pet store years before the accident. Echo loved Richard, and Richard talked to Echo about everything. About his fears. About Melissa. About feeling trapped. Help me, Echo, the parrot suddenly said in Richard's voice. Help me? People gasped. Some covered their mouths. Andrea nodded. Echo heard everything in that house. Every argument. Every cry for help. Every word of fear. Parrots don't just repeat random words. They repeat what matters. What they hear over and over. What's said with strong emotion. She turned to face the jury. Now let me tell you about Dylan Cross. A new photograph appeared on the screen at the front of the courtroom. It showed a man with dark hair and cold eyes. He was younger than Richard and much more handsome. Dylan Cross worked at the same hospital where Melissa used to work before she quit. They knew each other. Hospital records show they had lunch together 14 times in the 6 months before the fire. Phone records show they texted each other 473 times. Mr. Thompson stood up again. Your Honor, what does this Dylan Cross have to do with the fire? Andrea's eyes went sharp. Everything. Because Dylan Cross is a mechanic. And 3 months before the fire, Richard's wheelchair started having problems. The brakes wouldn't work right. Richard almost rolled down a hill into traffic. He told Melissa the wheelchair needed fixing. She clicked to another photo. This one showed Richard's damaged wheelchair. After the fire, investigators examined this wheelchair. They found something interesting. The brake cables had been cut. Not worn out, not broken by accident. Cut with wire cutters. Someone wanted Richard's wheelchair to fail. Whispers filled the courtroom like buzzing bees. And guess who has a workshop full of tools? Guess who Melissa was texting the day before the fire? Andrea pointed at Dylan's photo. Dylan Cross. We found texts between them discussing the plan. Discussing making it look like an accident. Discussing what they would do with Richard's life insurance money after he was gone. Melissa's calm mask finally broke. Her mouth opened. Her eyes went wide. That's not. I never. Mr. Thompson grabbed her arm. Don't say anything, he hissed. But it was too late. Everyone had seen her panic. Everyone had heard her start to defend herself before her lawyers stopped her. Andrea pulled out a phone. Melissa's phone, taken by the police. Let me read you one text from Melissa to Dylan, sent 3 days before the fire. It says, I can't do this anymore. He's making me miserable. We need to end this soon. She looked up. Dylan responded, I'll take care of the wheelchair. You take care of the rest. Then we'll be together. The jury members looked at each other with shock and disgust on their faces. Andrea continued. The night of the fire, Dylan was supposed to be at work at the hospital, but security cameras show he left early. His car was seen driving near Maple Street at 11:15. Melissa's car was parked 2 blocks away at 11:30, and the fire started at 11:45. She walked slowly back to Echo's cage. But they didn't plan on one thing. They didn't plan on firefighters arriving so fast. They didn't plan on Richard surviving. And they definitely didn't plan on Echo. Don't do this to me, Echo said again, this time louder. Please don't do this to me. Andrea looked at the parrot with something like sadness in her eyes. Echo heard Richard begging Melissa not to hurt him. And Echo remembered, because that's what parrots do. They remember the voices of the people they love. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have phone records, text messages, a cut break cable, security footage, witness testimony, and we have Echo, who heard Richard's final words before someone tried to murder him. Judge Benton looked at Melissa. Does the defense have anything to say? Mr. Thompson stood up slowly. He looked tired. Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence. The text messages were taken out of context. Dylan Cross was just a friend. And the parrot? Well, a parrot's words cannot prove guilt. This is all circumstantial. Circumstantial? Andrea's voice rose. We have everything but a video recording of the crime. We have motive. We have opportunity. We have evidence of conspiracy. And we have a victim who can't speak for himself anymore. So his parrot speaks for him. Echo ruffled his feathers and made a sad, cooing sound. Then, in the quietest voice yet, he said something that made everyone's blood run cold. Goodbye, Echo. I love you. Those were Richard's last words to his bird before the fire, before the smoke, before he thought he would die. The courtroom fell completely silent. Some people cried openly now. Even the judge's eyes looked wet. Melissa put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. Whether from fear or guilt or sadness, nobody could tell. Andrea stood in the middle of the room. Richard Hale loved that bird, and that bird loved him back. Love doesn't forget. Memory doesn't lie. And justice won't ignore what Echo remembers. Judge Benton picked up his hammer, but didn't bang it yet. He just stared at Melissa for a long, long moment. We'll take a short break, he finally said. When we return, the defense will present their case, if they have one. As people stood up and started moving, Echo said one more thing, so quiet that only the people nearest to his cage heard it. She's lying. She's lying. And somewhere in a hospital bed across town, Richard Hale lay silent, unable to speak the truth that his beloved parrot was speaking for him. After the break, everyone filed back into the courtroom. The air felt different now, heavier, like a storm was about to break. Judge Benton settled into his chair and looked at Mr. Thompson. Does the defense wish to present their case? Mr. Thompson stood up slowly. He looked at Melissa, then at the jury, then back at the judge. Your Honor, we request a recess to confer with our client. Denied. Judge Benton said firmly, you've had plenty of time. Present your defense or rest your case. Mr. Thompson's face turned red again. He shuffled his papers nervously. Your Honor, my client has been painted as a monster, but she's not. She's a woman who gave up everything to care for a paralyzed husband. She gave up her career, her freedom, her life. Andrea stood up. She also gave up her marriage vows when she started planning to kill him. Objection. Sustained, the judge said. Ms. Clean, please wait your turn. Mr. Thompson continued, his voice shaking slightly. Yes, Melissa knew Dylan Cross. Yes, they were friends. But friendship isn't crime. Those text messages could mean anything. End this could mean ending her stress, not ending Richard's life. And the cut break cables? Andrea asked, unable to stay quiet. Ms. Clean, Judge Benton warned. Mr. Thompson ignored her. There's no proof Melissa cut those cables. No proof she poured the gasoline. No proof she lit the match. All you have is a parrot repeating phrases that could have been said at any time, in any context. He walked toward Echo's cage. This bird is not a reliable witness. Birds repeat things randomly. They mimic sounds. They don't understand what they're saying. For all we know, Echo heard those phrases from a television show or a movie. Richard Hale didn't watch television, Andrea said quietly. He couldn't reach the remote. The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Thompson opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no response to that. Judge Benton leaned forward. Ms. Clean, do you have any additional evidence? Andrea smiled. Not a happy smile. Asad, knowing smile. Yes, Your Honor. One more piece. The most important piece. She nodded to a police officer standing by the door. He wheeled in a cart with a laptop computer and a large screen. On the night of the fire, Andrea explained, firefighters wore body cameras. Standard procedure. Those cameras recorded everything they saw and heard when they entered the burning house. She pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The video was shaky and filled with smoke. You could hear men shouting. Flames crackled and roared. The camera moved through a doorway into the living room. And there, in the middle of the smoke and fire, was Richard in his wheelchair. The entire courtroom leaned forward. The firefighter's voice came through the speakers. "I've got a victim, male unconscious, in a wheelchair." Another voice. "There's a bird. There's a parrot in a cage." The camera swung toward Echo's cage near the window. Through the smoke, you could see the green parrot flapping and screaming. And then, clear as a bell, Echo's voice came through the speakers. "Melissa, don't do this to me. Please. I can't move. Don't do this." Over and over, screaming it, begging it. Several people in the courtroom started crying, but Andrea wasn't finished. She pressed another button. This next video is from a neighbor's security camera across the street. It has a timestamp. The new video showed the front of Richard's house from a distance. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m. A figure appeared on the screen, walking quickly toward the house. Even in the grainy footage, you could see it was a woman with Melissa's build, wearing Melissa's jacket. The figure went inside. 2 minutes passed. Then, at 11:44 p.m., the figure came out, walking fast, almost running. 30 seconds later, orange light flickered in the windows. Fire. At 11:47 p.m., the figure got into a car parked 2 blocks away. The camera caught the license plate clearly. It was Melissa's car. The courtroom exploded with noise. People shouted. Reporters scrambled to take notes. The judge banged his hammer over and over. "Order! Order!" When everyone finally quieted down, Andrea spoke in a voice that was calm but full of power. That video proves Melissa Hale was in that house minutes before the fire started. She lied about being at her sister's house. She lied about everything. She turned to face Melissa directly. "You poured gasoline around your husband's wheelchair while he begged you to stop. You knew he couldn't move, couldn't escape, couldn't save himself. You lit the match and walked away, leaving him to burn alive." Melissa's face crumbled. Tears poured down her cheeks. But she didn't speak, couldn't speak. Andrea's voice got softer. "The only reason Richard Hale is alive today is because a neighbor saw the smoke and called 911 fast. And because Echo wouldn't stop screaming. The firefighters heard that parrot and knew someone was inside." She walked to Echo's cage and looked at the bird with respect. Echo saved Richard's life by refusing to be quiet, by remembering what Richard said, by speaking for a man who can't speak anymore. Echo tilted his head and made a soft clicking sound. Judge Benton looked at Melissa. His face was grave. Does a defendant have anything to say? Melissa stood up on shaking legs. Her perfect appearance was destroyed. Her makeup ran down her face. Her hair fell in messy strands. She looked small and broken. Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go so far. I couldn't do it anymore. Taking care of him. Day after day. Year after year. I felt like I was drowning. Like my life was over." Mr. Thompson tried to pull her down. Melissa stopped talking. But she couldn't stop. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. "Dylan said we could be together. That we could be happy. He said we just needed to make Richard go away. I didn't want to kill him. I just wanted to be free." She looked at the jury with desperate eyes. "Don't you understand? I was trapped. I gave up everything for him." "He gave up everything too," Andrea said quietly. "He lost his legs, his job, his independence, his ability to speak. But he never tried to hurt you. He just loved his parrot and tried to survive each day." Melissa collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. Judge Benton was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was heavy with sadness and anger. "Melissa Hale, you have been charged with attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The video footage, the text messages, the cut brake cables, the body camera audio, and yes, even the parrot's testimony. He looked at Echo. Some might say a bird cannot be a witness. But I say this, memory is memory. Truth is truth, whether it comes from a person or from a creature who loved a person enough to remember his words. The judge picked up his hammer. The jury will now deliberate. But the head juror, an older woman with kind eyes, stood up. Your Honor, we don't need to deliberate. We've seen and heard enough. Judge Benton nodded slowly. Very well. Have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. She looked at Melissa with a mix of pity and disgust. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of arson, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. Melissa let out a wail that echoed through the courtroom. Judge Benton banged his hammer. Melissa Hale, you're sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Dylan Cross will be arrested and tried as an accomplice. This court is adjourned. As police officers came forward to take Melissa away in handcuffs, Echo spoke one final time. Good boy, Echo. You saved me once. It was Richard's voice. Gentle, loving, grateful. The parrot had saved him. Not once, but twice. First by alerting the firefighters with his screaming, and second by remembering the truth when no one else could speak it. Epilogue. 3 months later. Echo found a new home with Richard's sister, who visited Richard in the hospital every day. The parrot seemed happy there, though sometimes he still said phrases from his old life. Sad phrases. Scary phrases. But also loving phrases. I love you, Echo. Good boy. You're my best friend. Richard remained in the hospital, slowly recovering. The doctor said he might never speak again, but his eyes were alert, aware. And when his sister brought Echo to visit, Richard's face would light up with joy. Melissa sat in a prison cell, finally understanding what it meant to lose your freedom, to be trapped, to depend on others for everything. The very thing she'd hated Richard for experiencing. And somewhere in that quiet cell, she remembered Echo's words. Words she'd tried to forget. Words that had convicted her. Melissa, don't do this to me. In the end, truth won. Not because of fancy lawyers or complicated science, but because one small parrot refused to forget. Refused to let the voice of an innocent man be silenced. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it speaks with feathers and a beak. Sometimes it comes from the smallest witnesses with the longest memories. And sometimes the most powerful testimony doesn't come from a person at all. It comes from love, from loyalty, from a green parrot named Echo who remembered everything. If this story touched your heart and made you think about loyalty, memory, and justice, please like this story, share it with someone who loves mysteries and courtroom dramas, and subscribe to read more incredible true crime tales that will leave you speechless. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories like Echo's. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next gripping story.